Hey, what's going on, guys? Aarava here, and welcome to this tech roundup for the 2018 Spanish Grand Prix here on Thursday, ahead of the Friday practice and the entire race weekend. Indeed, I've done an entire video on the McLaren quote-unquote B-spec car. Obviously, McLaren coming here with a new nose, new bodywork for the rear end, and also some new bits to their bargeboard areas. Go check out that video. Annotation in the top right will take that. There's a full dedicated video just to the McLaren because there was that much of a big difference and that much of a talking point, really, about that. So that's a whole video on the McLaren, but we're going to get on with the rest of the cars, as it were, and look through the kind of most interesting, kind of big things to shout about for the other cars coming here to Barcelona, where obviously most of the teams bring big updates for the first time in the year, and Ferrari definitely the biggest guys to kind of shout about, apart from McLaren, with a very, very intriguing thing that caught a lot of people's eye, especially on Twitter, a lot of conversations about it, with obviously we talked about on the podcast that the FIA told the teams that they're now allowed, and there's a ruling, I think it was a loophole, but the FIA kind of clarified that yes, the teams can attach the mirrors and mount them on the halo, and teams like Force India kind of said it's a little bit harder than you think it is, or probably we won't be doing it. Ferrari have rocked up to Spain saying, yeah, we're going to do it, and we're also going to cheekily add a kind of quote-unquote structural aid to the mount to help it stay there, but we really know it's probably there for aerodynamics sake. You can see the mount right there, the top mount. They'll probably argue to the FIA, if anyone questions, that is structurally there to hold up the mirror, because you can see the little upright there that connects to the other side of the mirror, and they are probably going to argue that it needs to be there to help the mirror not fall off and dangle and flex, which would, I think, be illegal if it started flexing. But what you can clearly see is already with the unique design of the mirror anyway, with this little vein here and allowing air to pass through on the up and down part of this mirror and let air straight through. Ferrari already had that, but by mounting it on the halo now, they can mount it a little bit higher maybe than it used to be, or maybe the same position, but they now got this one little upright here that connects into the mirror, and then more importantly, this extra bit, which you just know has been carefully placed to try and get some aerodynamic benefit. They're going to try and clean up air that's going to maybe potentially be around here, hitting the halo part of the actual car, and also on this rather other side, this entire structure just becomes a little bit of an extra winglet that can be there, that didn't used to be there. And potentially the way it's lined up, I imagine it's going to be almost the kind of level height almost of the rear wing, so potentially any free stream air that usually just passes straight on through this area of 3D space around the car, just goes straight on towards the rear wing. They can already start to play with that air delicately and maybe try and channel it specifically to where they want it to be on the part of the rear wing, or if it doesn't line up with the rear wing, simply just play with it to try and aid the airflow along the entire side of the car, essentially. Obviously, the teams, every team, do so much work this year on the barge boards, on the end plate of the side pods, and so Ferrari can add to this with this little winglet here, and I wouldn't be surprised now after seeing this, and if it all goes well for Ferrari and they keep it and they can see a benefit, I wouldn't be surprised if other teams, especially like Red Bull or Mercedes, maybe try and mimic and copy it. Maybe not. We've seen in the past sometimes, the major teams, they try certain things that the other major teams don't actually bother to go with. It doesn't fit in with their philosophy. They don't think it's going to be worth the time and effort of R&D, but clearly Ferrari are trying to think out of the box, which is good, because Ferrari, that's always been a thing for them throughout the years of Formula 1. They've never been as innovative as we go on through the season. Sometimes they rock up with a really good car at the start, yes, but sometimes they don't continue on that innovation as we go on through the year, and other teams, the past couple of years, Mercedes and Red Bull have outdeveloped them, whereas Ferrari now, especially from last year and into this year especially more so, they look like they've been, focusing on that a lot more, and, they're trying to take a hold on what has been, quote-unquote, the kind of fastest car overall this year, really, depending on how you want to look at it. So, yeah, really interesting development for Ferrari. We've got a few different angles to look at just to kind of show you this vein and kind of new mounting structure a lot better from some different angles. Here you can get a better sense of the actual shape of this kind of winglet vein structural element. You can see the way it kind of curves a little bit down, and then the actual trailing edge on the outside of it, on the actual end of it, is a little bit curved there. So you can imagine if air is kind of flowing through either underside or the top side there, just be played around a little bit. Almost like, if you remember, the little winglets that some teams opt for ahead of the roll hoop. The roll hoop on top of the very car, the highest point in the car, just above the engine inlet, the entire roll hoop housing. Sometimes teams have opted for a little winglet there to try and guide the air to the top of the rear wing. They might be trying to play around with the air in this way to try and either aid airflow towards the rear wing, or, like I said, maybe just the entire side of the car. You've got that side pod air that's flowing through underneath on top of the side pod surface, so maybe trying to play around with that that, maybe trying to create a more efficient flow as it goes down towards downstream of the car, but just generally very ingenious way of looking at it for Ferrari's perspective. From aesthetically, I can imagine, obviously, it's not amazing. On track, I'm going to look forward to seeing how it looks at high speed. Definitely a lot of people saying it's kind of like got eyebrows almost, like the Halo has grown eyebrows. So, yeah, it's maybe some people will be calling it, to kind of quote James May from Top Gear, in Top Gear days, gopping maybe is the word, but you know, it's aero, so that kind of side of me, the nerdier side of me, kind of just appreciates it for that. You have a top-down view here, and actually from this top face, this is definitely the worst angle actually to look at it from the top down. Like, from a T-cam perspective, this is going to look very, very odd, because you're going to have where the mirror usually is, and then basically a very high winglet in your face. So it's going to be interesting to see how these cameras also cope with the kind of way it looks on camera when we're on board with Vettel or Raikkonen here. But just, yeah, a few different angles, so you can really take a good look at it. Something which is not majorly new, but the Ferrari has a very interesting flaw and has done for now the last race or so. We talked about kind of a loophole on the podcast where Ferrari have now kind of added a hole. You can't really see it right now, but they had it at Azerbaijan, where they have an entire hole on the edge of the floor, because due to the rules, the way they're kind of worded, they can play around with the meaning of that. And just the intricacy of the Ferrari floor definitely has kept on improving, and we've seen also other teams like McLaren have added to that with the upgrade packages, but Ferrari keeping it very nice and tidy on the rear end there. Just a small little update for them there. Moving on to Red Bull. Red Bull have done a lot of work around their bargeboard area to try and play around with it and try and maximize the downforce, I guess, and also cutting drag at the same time. This is an incomplete Red Bull car as it was being made, but this is the bottom edge floor of the bargeboard here, and you can see the array of daggers and really crafted winglets they've got here to kind of not only cut drag, but also that'll be channeling different channels of air, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, almost through to the underfloor of the car, and also around to the bargeboard area once the rest of it gets stuck on. Speaking of the rest of it getting stuck on, here is the main part of the bargeboard here, so this will actually be overlaying just a bit ahead of those underfloor daggers here, and you can see the intricacy adding to what they already had. I think they started off with 3 or 2 little uprights here, so now they've added to it. They've got a total of 4 now, 3 at the very start, and then 1 here. And all of these intricately lined up in a way where it's going to be able to shift the air around to the edge of the bargeboard, the end plate of the side pod, and then also around to the edge of the car, and also to the underfloor. A lot of this will be for the underfloor as well, because obviously we can't see it right now, but if you were to flip it upside down, you would be able to see how all these little divots and slots all kind of play into what is a very complex floor for most of these Formula 1 cars. And finally, also Red Bull played around with the floor, and also I think maybe even the side pod a little bit in terms of tucking it in and suckering it in, and the rear end may have changed a little bit in terms of the actual geometry, just ever so slightly, but Red Bull clearly doing actually the most work out of the top 3 teams, Mercedes, Ferrari, and them. I mean, Ferrari maybe with the most striking, but Red Bull with a lot of little tiny details around the bargeboard area, trying to add to this entire kind of jungle house, if you will, of aerodynamic devices to try and get air around the car to the rear end. Obviously, all of this trying to treat the air before it gets towards the rear end of the diffuser, and obviously Spain being very dependent on downforce, and Red Bull being known good for that, obviously not surprising, and I expect Red Bull to go pretty well. We'll see what kind of pace they have in terms of the tyres, how they react. Obviously, that's going to be a big factor for this weekend, how the tyres are going to react for the Mercedes car versus the Ferrari, and if Red Bull like the tyres and they go for a more aggressive strategy, maybe we could see them really get into the mix, hopefully, fingers crossed. We talked about this maybe in a previous tech update, but you know, the top teams aren't away from copying the kind of smaller teams, and so this is Mercedes on the front suspension arms and the brake duct copying a kind of Sauber style winglet that goes upright from the suspension. So like Sauber did, you know, 2 races ago, I think it was, they introduced these turning vanes just on the suspension arms, just ahead, kind of connected within the kind of brake housing itself. So Mercedes copying that structure and just trying to play around with the air just on the inside wall of the front tire, something which I think as part of the rules will be outlawed. I think the rules for 2019 have been written in a way that they're not going to allow any winglets on the brake ducts, but I'm not too sure what that means for these kind of winglets, but I would like to think that's also included. So this kind of stuff actually will be outlawed for 2019, but Mercedes for now, for 2018, definitely taking it to the max and trying to play around with that air, especially obviously a lot of turbulent air will come off this sidewall of the inner tire, and so if they can try and deflect that actually as much as they can away from the inside of the car to where the chassis body is, where a lot of intricate vortices are trying to be made as they go downstream of the car, created off the front wing element, and also the kind of cape that Mercedes have have. They're trying to get as much air potentially away from that inner part, and then also just trying to push it to the outside face and trying to mix that air as it comes off turbulent off the actual back end of the front tire. Just a top-down look here, you can see a much better angle, so they've kind of got this almost kind of elongated L shape, so you can imagine if any air kind of gets spun off the tire, it's going to get hit around here and be projected back towards itself rather than go towards the inner side where you can see all this intricate kind of aerodynamic start. So trying to get air away from that area. But a nice top-down view, you can see a little bit more clearly what I mean. Renault come to Spain with a bit of a different front wing spec. They've worked a little bit more on the corners of their front wing. A very important part here, squirting air towards its outside face of the front tires where a vortex naturally forms anyway, if a wheel was there, and also with the wing, but then trying to make that vortex even stronger as it then goes down and encourages mixing of any turbulent air also coming off the front tires and controlling that as it goes downstream. So Renault working harder on that and kind of squirting more air towards that area of the car. And then also they've changed the kind of architecture of this front-facing flap of the front wing, trying to play around with the air that's moving downwards towards the bargeboard areas and the under tray of the car. You can see here in this photo a little bit better what I mean. You've got these three different little slots here, whereas before it was just one extra slot. So you can imagine this entire big structure actually was moved a little bit far forward to add these two extra vane slots here. So trying to squirt air even more intricately towards that inner vortex, to that outside vortex, I should say, on the front tire. Going through to the midfield teams and a little bit down the order, we've got the likes of Haas. We've also got Toro Rosso, just showing you the intricacy of the bargeboard area. Haas, just detailing here the next few pictures really in terms of the intricacy of these different midfield cars, and you can see the differences. And I just kind of like to look at them and appreciate the difference between each car. They all kind of have their different characteristics, if you will. If you look at the Williams, a bit more of a Ferrari copy from this year's car, whereas Haas kind of copies almost the kind of splice between the Mercedes and Ferrari of last year almost. And then Williams has gone for a much more Force India and Mercedes approach of the daggers ahead of the bargeboard, rather than Haas going for a bit more of a chiseled kind of line to each of their bargeboard elements. And then Toro Rosso have had this kind of setup going on since Bahrain actually, but you can see the difference there again in terms of they got a bit of a bigger scoop turn and a lot of drag cutting devices. Obviously they're having to deal with the Honda engine, so potentially trying to cut some drag here. And obviously in a straight line the Toro Rosso hasn't really been that bad, and I think that's a lot due to not just the Honda engine improving, but the Toro Rosso car is definitely very efficient as well in terms of the way it's dealing with that. And actually I think I might be wrong on this, so don't quote me on it, but I think also this looks like a bit of a wider upright actually, and a bit of a two-pronged effort from Toro Rosso, and a bit of a different way they've connected it. So I think that might be different for the Spanish Grand Prix, and definitely wouldn't be surprising as they try and add bulk onto this entire area and try and catch up with the kind of top teams. Toro Rosso also a different team to play around with the wing mirror area, not like Ferrari. Instead of hanging it, they've got these different kind of double veined and split slot gap area to the upright that connects into the mirror, and then they've extended this flat floor face, trying to maybe get air sculpted round. You can see a bit of a dip there with the shadow work, so you can imagine air that's going underneath this area is going to be met with a little bit of a wall, so it just encourages air to continue moving on downwards. Actually, something I skipped over was the Ferrari guys behind the actual main bargeboard structure. They've added some more slots to the actual underfloor when you get to the kind of bargeboard merging into the under tray area. So 3 new different slots for the Ferrari car, and you can see the way they're curving through. So air coming through that does get kind of trapped within this little slot is going to get channeled through to this underside, and you can imagine that'll be intricately lined up with the floor and the kind of structure they've got underneath the floor of the car. And then actually finally you can see this is the Force India actually with the BWT sponsoring here, but just a different kind of perspective and a detail of a new bit of their floor face. So just a nice little detail to end it off there, but that is indeed where we're going to end off then for this tech roundup. Definitely have missed a few different things around here, but I didn't want to make the video very too long, especially because I did go on a lot about the McLaren car. Again, you can see that video either by clicking my channel, you can see it on the channel page, or as I said at the very beginning, there was that annotation on the top right there for the new McLaren B-Spec car. Be sure to go check that one out if you have enjoyed this one, but do hit the like button on this video, guys, if you did enjoy it and did find it interesting and informative. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. What do you make of that Ferrari mirror? You know, do you think it's gopping? Do you think it's all right? You know, do you just kind of appreciate it from an aero perspective? I want to get your opinion on it, guys, so do let me know. If you are new around here, do get subscribed for weekly Formula 1 content. We do a podcast here. We do these kind of roundups every single time there's a Grand Prix, and as I said, with the podcast reviewing the upcoming Grand Prix as well, so do get subscribed for that. And also, as you look around, there'll be plenty of other F1 gaming videos that might tickle your fancy. But yeah, I've been Aarava. Hope you enjoyed the day. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.